Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Two Cents, and welcome to this, I don't know what you call it, final 2024 election summary video. This is the last time I'm going to talk about the 2024 election because, quite frankly, I'm kind of sick of it. Um, I meant to do this video about a week ago, but I've been sick and I've had a lot of stuff going on, so this is going to be the final wrap up. I did kind of an autopsy of just the presidential election about 10 days ago or so. This is going to kind of take a look at everything now that most everything's been counted now. I know there's still a few House districts and other votes that are being counted. But yeah, with that being said, on November 22nd, about 2 weeks and 3 days after election day, the majority's been counted and figured out. So here we go. So I'm not going to go in depth on any of these races like I did in my last video. And you'll probably see on my channel, I did get rid of a fair amount of the prediction videos that I had from the summer all the way through to the week before the election, because a lot of them are irrelevant at this point. I admit I was wrong on the swing states for the president. But with that being said, I did delete a lot of those videos. I did keep up the last ones that I had for all of the races: president, senate, governors, house. I think they were the ones like a day or a week before the actual election day. So with all that being out of the way, this is the final time you're going to hear me talk about the 2024 election because, quite frankly, I'm pretty sick of politics already. So with that being said, you can see here's the final presidential map. Um, 312 to 226. Obviously, Donald Trump, he won all seven swing states from Georgia to North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. Um, and then I'll quickly show you where the popular vote stands as of this moment. Um, So it looks like Trump's got just under 77 million and Harris has just over 74.3 million. So 49.9 to 48.3. A lot of that changed because initially it was 74 million for Trump to 69 million. Or actually, I think initially it was 72 million for Trump to 67 million for Harris. But of course, with California being counted over the last 2 weeks, Harris bumped up quite a bit to the point where she's about 2.5 million votes less than Trump in the popular vote, as compared to the 5 million votes that it was initially the day or two after election day. So that's not really a surprise. Plus, Trump was at like 51% of the popular vote, and she was at like 47 or 48% initially. Um, so it's not really a surprise that those numbers closed together because obviously California, they counted about 69% of the vote throughout the state initially. And now they've counted like the last 30%, which of course heavily favored Harris. Um, so this isn't a surprise here. I'm not surprised that neither candidate reached 50%, although Donald Trump's just under 50% at 49.9. I don't know where they are in the count. I'm assuming that's probably nine. It's no. I know it's more than 95% in California and the other states. So I'm not really going to spend the time looking into it. But basically, Trump is going to win the popular vote by about between 2 and 2.5 million votes at the end of the day. Not the 5 million that they figured on election night. But that really shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. So just wanted to quickly touch on that. So looking at the electoral map, like I said, 312, 226 is going to be the final tally. Um, he is going to win the popular vote by 2 to 2.5 million votes, which, again, it's the first time a Republican candidate for president has won the popular vote since 2004, 20 years ago, when George W. Bush did. So now you might say, why is that? Well, he won all seven swing states. But then, as I mentioned in my autopsy video shortly after election night, he ran up the margins in Florida, Texas, Ohio, other states that he's won in the previous two presidential election cycles. but not by double figures like he did this time around. Like he went from Florida's the biggest difference. He went from winning Florida by 3 points in 2020 to about 13 points in 2024. So a 10 point increase there. Texas, he went from winning by 6 points to like 13 or 14 points. Ohio, he went from winning about 7 or 8 points in the previous two presidential elections to around 12 points. So that, coupled with the fact that he did a lot better in major cities, um, you know, he basically did in New York, for example. He lost by 23 points or so in 2020, and he ended up losing by about 12 to 13 points in 2024. Um, excuse me. He increased his margins in cities like Milwaukee and Detroit. Um, Atlanta to a certain extent. New Jersey, he only lost that state by 5 points after I believe losing it by 16. So all these things sort of add up as to why he won the popular vote. Of course, that's the point I'm trying to make here. Well, sweeping all seven swing states, even though he didn't win them by a huge margin, I think Arizona was the one he ended up winning the biggest by 6 or 7 points. Um, otherwise Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania were all within a couple of points, but he did win them, and those couple of points, those were bigger wins than he had in these states than he did in 2016 when he won them, when he basically won by well less than a 1 percentage point, especially in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. He won all of them bigger this time. He didn't necessarily win Georgia bigger than he did in 2016 or North Carolina, but he did win them bigger than he did in 2020. Obviously, he didn't even win Georgia in 2020, and then these two states, Nevada, he'd never won before until 2024. And Arizona, I think he's won. I think he won Arizona by more than any time he's run before, by more than 2016. So that's my long answer of saying that Donald Trump did the best that he's done in any of the three times he's ran for president, both from an electoral standpoint and from obviously winning the popular vote, which he never did in 16 or 20 before, and giving you my reasons why that's the case, running up the margins and states he has won before, like Florida, Texas, Ohio, and then cutting the margins in states like New York, New Jersey, Virginia, um, I don't know. I don't think he really did much different in California. He might have improved by 1 or 2 points, but he's still down in the mid 30s to the lower 60s for the Democrats. So California wasn't really a game changer. He also did better in New Mexico, I should say as well, and a little better in Colorado. So the states that are still blue, they're blue, but they're not as blue as they were, especially in 2020, and in some cases, not even 2016. So with that being said, now let's go ahead and take a look at the Senate race, which is very interesting. You're going to hear a term in this election you probably haven't heard unless you've been following presidential politics in 20 or 30 years, which is what we call ticket splitting. So you can see the final tally for the Senate is 53 Republicans, 47 Democrats. Five of the seven presidential election swing states, so excluding North Carolina and Georgia, five of them, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Four of those five, despite voting for Trump and the Republicans at the presidential election, actually voted for Democrats. Four of the five did at the Senate level. The only exception is Pennsylvania, which was very close, and I think Democrats were even trying to count illegal ballots as of earlier this week to try to get that one in their favor. But it's been called now by the AP anyway, that Bob Casey's been unseated there in Pennsylvania. So thus we get 53-47. But Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona, I find them very interesting because Trump obviously won those states. And in the case of Arizona, he won by 6 points, where the Democrat Gallego, Ruben Gallego, I don't know how to pronounce that last name. He obviously beat Kerry Lake by a few points, not as big as the polls indicated. Um, there was ticket splitting that went on in these states, Wisconsin and Michigan, Nevada and Arizona. if you don't know what ticket splitting is, that ultimately means that there was at least probably about a quarter of the voters, maybe a little bit less, that voted for Donald Trump at the presidential election, but then they went and voted for the Democratic nominee for Senate. And in the case of Nevada, Wisconsin, those two you had Tammy Baldwin, who was the incumbent, and Jackie Rosen was the incumbent. Um, they stuck with the incumbents. Michigan and Arizona, you could say the same thing because I think they were Democrat held seats, Senate seats, but not the individual that ended up winning them, and Alyssa Slotkin or Ruben Gallego. But the party held the seat. So, like I said, the one exception is Pennsylvania, where the incumbent Bob Casey was defeated ultimately by McCormick, the Republican. So I just find that very interesting because you haven't really heard a lot about ticket splitting over the last 20 or 30 years. I know back in the 70s and 80s, it was a much bigger thing where you would hear ticket splitting a lot, especially like in the landslide victories for Richard Nixon in 1972 and Ronald Reagan in 1980 and 84. But you really haven't heard about it that much, especially over the last 25 years in this century. But this was an election. Like I said, there was a quarter of the vote, or a little bit less, a fifth of the vote, maybe, in these swing states that decided, okay, I'm going to vote for Trump at presidential level, the Republican, but I'm going to vote Democrat at the Senate level. I just find that very interesting. And like I said, it wasn't a huge percentage of those states, a huge percentage of the voters, but it was a significant enough margin where the Democrats held four of those five swing Senate states. Um, I think Baldwin won by about 30 or 45,000 votes over Hovde. I don't know what the final numbers is for Slotkin, but she won by a bit. Same with Jackie Rosen and Ruben Gillay. I think Arizona probably had the biggest swing between president, Republican, and Senate Democrat of any of the seven swing states. So I just find that very interesting. Um, and then we'll quickly take a look at the House here, which is still I still don't think they have all the seats counted in the House yet. No, there's still two seats that are outstanding, both in California. And I looked at them the other day, and my God, I can't believe how close they are. Um, one of them is California 13 between the incumbent uh, Duarte. I don't know how you pronounce his name. The Republican incumbent actually is down, I think, a little bit, but it's only by like 200 some votes. And then the other one I think is actually no, I think he's up. Michelle Steele is the one that's down to Tran. And I think it's is it 40? I think it's California's 40th or something. That's the one where the Democrats are ahead by like a couple hundred votes. Duarte, I think, is going to end up. Basically, I think they're going to split these last two. I think you're looking at a final margin of 221 to 214 of the House. So the Republicans, at the end of the day, took the House not by a very big margin, but they still kept it, which a month ago it didn't even look like that was going to happen. They took the Senate 53-47, so not as big of a margin, but they did take it, which is big, especially that 53-47 instead of 52-48, because there's a couple of Republican senators, namely Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, that don't exactly fall in line with the Trump Republicans. So if they're voting on an important issue, having McCormick win Pennsylvania, they're not going to have to worry about having Vance come in as the VP as the deciding vote. They're basically going to have 51 pretty strong Republicans for any vote that they have, and that's even if Collins and Murkowski vote against what Trump is asking for, what the Republicans are leaning towards. So that was big that McCormick ended up winning Pennsylvania. So yeah, obviously the Republicans had a good 2024 election, and I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm an independent. I know why the Republicans won as well as they did. I'm not really going to get into all those reasons. The biggest reason is the candidate that Donald Trump was running against. That's one thing I forgot to mention with ticket splitting. It's the ultimate indictment on Kamala Harris, frankly, because it's not like the voters said, well, we're going full MAGA, full Republican in this election. They really didn't do that. They just did at the presidential level. And it's not necessarily because, well, Donald Trump's a little bit more popular by 1 or 2 points, maybe, or a little bit more likable than he was in the previous 8 years. Probably because, partially because of the assassination attempts. I think it says more about the candidate he was running against. Kamala Harris was a terrible candidate for the Democrats. I don't know if they would have been better keeping Joe Biden because I think he would have lost too. It probably would have changed in different areas and stuff. He might have won 1 or 2 of the swing states. But I just don't think Kamala Harris could ever relate to anybody, especially in this part of the country. Obviously, she was going to win the West Coast and the Northeast by decent margins, although she didn't win them by as big a margins as Biden did. Um, but Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, those voters couldn't relate to Kamala Harris, a California senator and uh, attorney general. She just couldn't appeal to those people the way that Biden could appeal to enough of them anyway in 2020, or other Democratic candidates could or would have. So again, I don't think this is the United States is MAGA country. Even though some of the MAGA people voters would like to believe that, I think it's more Donald Trump was the better choice, considering who he was running against and kind of where the country and the world, frankly, is sitting at right now. But you saw that in the Senate and the House, more so the Senate, because the fact that Republicans took the House probably was more of a coattail effect by Donald Trump winning the presidency, but less so for the Senate. That's where you had the ticket splitting was the president house versus the Senate, basically. Um, so yeah, I'm not surprised that Trump won. I'm not necessarily happy that Trump won. I'm not sad that Harris lost. It is what it is at the end of the day. It was somewhat predictable. As I said, when you look at the 2 wars that we're involved in overseas, when you look at where the economy and inflation, food and gas prices are, everything else, Kamala Harris never focused on those issues because she really didn't have a popular stance on them, at least not for the majority of American people, only those on the left that, of course, voted for. Um, but again, Donald Trump being the polarizing figure he was what made this election closer in terms of the popular vote and also, well, it really wasn't. He won all 7 swing states, so electoral vote wise, it really wasn't that close. But um, let's just bring up the president again because he won all 7 swing states. 312, 226 is probably about as big as a Republican candidate could win the Electoral College at this point. Maybe Virginia, maybe New Hampshire, Minnesota, and Virginia, with a Glenn Youngkin kind of Republican or Ron DeSantis might have flipped, but I doubt it. I still think those are tough states for the Republicans to win in 2024 at the presidential level. But with that being said, this is about as good as it's going to get for a Republican, I think, electoral wise. I do think other Republican candidates could probably win the popular vote by 3 or 4 million votes. So 2 or 3 million votes more than Donald Trump, because I think they would do better in the suburbs of some of those, not only the swing states, but even some of the blue states. I think that's where the suburban vote has definitely moved away from the Republicans, and I think a lot of that's due to Donald Trump. Not all of it. I think some of it is generational wise, and some of it is just suburban women voters are more Democrat than they used to be. Suburban voters used to be. So, with all that being said, I hope that makes sense. That's a very overview, a very broad look at the entire election for 2024. But I'm kind of ready to move on to other things on my channel. This isn't an election. This isn't a political channel. I want to get back into TV shows, movies, sports. I'm going to be starting to talk about the NFL a lot here over the next few months as we get into December and January. But I didn't want to leave everybody hanging. I'm sure everybody was waiting for my overall thoughts on the election. I'm being facetious, but I did want to have this final video here to sort of wrap up the oversee view of the entire election here. So if you have any questions, comments, arguments, whatever, put them down in the comments below. Please like this video, hit the little notification bell, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of the great other topics that I'm going to be talking about over the next 3.5 years. It'll probably be, well, maybe I'll touch on politics and the election again in 2026. We'll have to see where we're at, but at least a year and a half before you hear anything from me on this channel, Brian's 2 cents. So, with all that being said, I thank you guys for being patient with me and watching all of my election and political videos. I hope you'll stick with me for a lot of my other non-horror TV shows, non-horror movie talk, cultural issues as well as sports and other things. I know I still got the Twilight Zone that I stopped doing like in June as far as individual episode reviews that I want to get back into at some point this winter. But with all that being said, thank you guys for watching. Please stick with me. Um, and we will see you at the next video. Bye.